right, Bindu. So I thought we'd look at the internet weather for this week, and not any surprising changes to what we normally see. This is the chart on the most scanned port activity just by sheer volume of scanning. And nothing surprising here. Telnet, SSH, 445 TCP is Microsoft data sharing, SMB file sharing. 8545 TCP, that one is another of those Ethereum wallets, so another cryptocurrency mining wallet, but it had a vulnerability.
Okay.
And as soon as that vulnerability was announced, we started to see all this increased scanning,
okay.
people trying to steal money from people's Ethereum wallets that were on the internet. FTP is in there. We're actually going to take a closer look at that one as well, because it shows up in the most scanned SIP one too. So I'm going to jump to that one. So this is the most sources probing, which is usually indicative of some sort of botnet related activity. We're going to take another look at 445 TCP, and then we're going to also look at FTP. The Microsoft SQL Server one I think is interesting because we've actually seen some cases of that for some customers and whatnot where they've had this hexben actor compromise their Microsoft SQL Server and implant those Trojans. So I think that's an important one to bring to light. Let's take a closer look at some of these. So 1433 TCP is the Microsoft SQL Server. And I did a 3-year chart just because I wanted to show that it kind of had a somewhat flat kind of chart here. And then somewhere around the April timeframe of last year, it really started to come up again. One of the things that we learned about a few weeks ago, or maybe late December, was there is an actor group out there called Hexmen that are looking for Microsoft SQL servers that are on the internet. They compromise them. And then they'll install malware or additional tools, cryptocurrency miners, things like that. So they're very motivated, specifically looking for Microsoft SQL Server. So it really aligns pretty well with that activity and is probably related to that, especially since this is scan flow activity. And it does look like it's just a few sources. It's not a whole bunch of source IPs doing this scanning. And they're mostly located in China, those sources. So if you're watching the show and you have Microsoft SQL servers and they're exposed to the internet, you want to have good passwords, but I would also recommend filtering access to those to only those things that need to access them directly.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? I think in addition to just scanning and looking for sort of patches, you want to make sure that you restrict access to such things so that you really only do what is allowed to talk back.
Right. So that's definitely one to keep an eye on. 445 TCP scanning, again, this is a 3-year chart just because I wanted to show how it's changed and kind of a longer term here. And most of this stuff is probably just some old configure infections still out there scanning. And then right here where this little weird spike appears, it's kind of hard to see, is when WannaCry emerged. And from that point forward, we saw this just kind of upward trend. Now there was a little dip here. When I first saw this dip, I reported on the show that, oh, that's interesting, it's going down again, and I hope it stays like that. But what I actually found out is that is a data loss issue on our part. So,
I just thought the holiday break, so they stopped.
No, yeah, it turned out that we started to look at it and we're like, wait a second, something doesn't smell right here, and we realized that there was a problem with our data collection. So, and then I think the last one I had here was port 21 TCP. We talked about this before, and this is actually a 5-year chart, so this is pretty far back. So we went from like very relatively small numbers of sources scanning on FTP, jumping up into like 1,500 scan sources, which is not a lot. And then we had another big step up to maybe 3,500 to 4,000, which again is not a huge number of scan sources per hour. There are actors out there that are specifically looking for FTP servers. So they scan for them, and then once they find ones that are like anonymous FTP servers, they will drop a file on there. So their hope is that somebody, whoever they drop it on there, that person's going to be on their computer or whatever, and they're going to be looking at their network attached storage and say, oh, what's this weird file? And they'll click on it, double click it to see what it is, and they get infected. And it's actually been working, and it is a cryptocurrency miner.
So end users and organizations, both of us should take a look at FTP and make sure that, one, if it's exposed to the internet, 2, if it's anonymous, just make sure that you are covered in these areas.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's all I really had for this week. Those were the interesting ones in the top 10 charts. So
I like how what we are seeing here relates back to some of the news and the stories that we cover, right? And it's like, a good correlation to see. What I find interesting is all the news stories that we hear about, in the background we have the data that we correlate to those, and it's unique, especially in the position that AT&T is in, to be able to see that.